Right, how's everybody doing? Right, I'm here today to talk to you about pop music. One of the best-selling albums of 1986 was the Beastie Boys' License to Ill. The lead single off of this was You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party. It's pretty exemplary of the lyrical content of the entire album. It's lighthearted, fun, nothing really violent in it. It's mostly about partying, about having fun, about boasting about yourself. Flash forward 2 years. It's 1988. One of the top-selling rap albums, according to Billboard, is NWA's Straight Outta Compton. The lead single off of that was Straight Outta Compton, and it's completely different lyrically from the Beastie Boys song. It's about violence, drugs, murder, aggression, violence a second time. And this is just one example of something that personifies the entire shift in mainstream hip-hop. We transitioned from golden age rap to what I call gangsta age rap. And my research was dedicated into finding out why and how this happened in such a short period of time, which seems unprecedented for any other type of music. As part of my research, I immersed myself fully into listening to hip-hop. I listened to hundreds of albums and songs, watched music videos, read books by hip-hop artists, about hip-hop artists, as well as looking at past research on similar topics and various figures. Before we cover the specifics of my topic and how that transition was made, I think it's necessary to cover the weight of the hip-hop universe. It's gone from being a relatively small niche market, maybe 10% of the giant that was rock and roll at one point, to being like the dominant entertainment force in the United States and in various parts of the world. It's not just music anymore, it's movies, fashion, language, books, etc. Just to put this all in perspective, in 2003, and this happened again since then, this was the first occurrence of this, according to Billboard, all 10 of the top 10 selling entertainment artists in the United States were hip-hop artists. Hip-hop artists have won the Grammy for Best Album, the Grammy for Best Song, and the Academy Award for Best Song. So it's kind of gone from nothing to everything in a short period of time. All right, so first we had Golden Age hip-hop. Like I said about the Beastie Boys, lighthearted boasts, lyrics and beats designed to cultivate a party environment, not so concerned with heavy lyrical themes or anything else really going on in the world. This is where you had people like Run DMC, LL Cool J, DJ Kool Herc, Beastie Boys. It's interesting because the real hip-hop becoming part of a larger subculture spun out of crime. In the 1977 blackout, according to Dan Charnas, who wrote a book about it, one of the major things stolen during that major blackout that was blacked out entire parts of the city of New York was DJ equipment and drum machines, which were relatively expensive at the time, so it kind of did that. And the first charting rap song, Trapper's Delight, so I have some of the lyrics of that up here. And you can kind of see that, like I talked about Beastie Boys lyrics, they're just boasts, they don't really mean anything, they're mostly about how cool the person rapping is and how much fun they're going to make you have. So changing lanes a little bit, another Golden Age rap song that I noticed in our research was massively influential was Grandmaster Flash's Message. Grandmaster Flash himself is a huge figure in the hip-hop world. He was the first person to ever record scratching, which is still probably the thing most people identify with hip-hop, so it kind of lends you the gravity of how important he was. His song, The Message, is just hugely influential on where hip-hop went out of the Golden Age. It drops the party message. It's all about the struggles that Grandmaster Flash has living in New York, the things that he deals with every day. He loses a job, he's got no money, his kids don't listen to him. And again, so here's the lyrics to that up there now, and everyone knows the chorus to that. It's like a jungle sometimes, makes you wonder how I keep from going under. And that's basically the first real hip-hop song that kind of captured the social aspects, which we'll tie into what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So then we move on to who I think is probably the most important figure that I've dealt with in this research in terms of making the hip-hop transition. That's Dr. Dre picture. He was heavily influenced by Grandmaster Flash. More than any one person, Dr. Dre was the cultivator of the gangsta image. He created what it was to look like a gangsta, what it was to rap like a gangsta, what the beats sounded like, etc. He created the careers of people like Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and various others who were influenced by him, maybe not directly like those ones were. And his lyrics were, and the beats he produced and the artists he worked with, were super violent, but they were also somewhat political, like the Grandmaster Flash song. Like he's produced the NWA album I talked about earlier, as well as his debut, The Chronic, both of which were ranked by MTV as 2 of the top 10 greatest hip-hop albums of all time. And he used the communications theory of dramatism to get his message across, where he cultivated these stories about life in the city that weren't necessarily true. They're about murder and gang violence and drugs, unless you really think that Ice Cube has killed like 20 people, in which case they should get the FBI on him. And the interesting thing here, as you'll see in this picture, is that Dr. Dre was originally a very Golden Age style rapper. He was part of a group called the World Press Wrecking Crew along with his NWA colleague, MC Ren. And so he rapped on things like various other people did. He did electro jams and party jams. And so this, to me, is significant because it proves that it was a deliberate reinvention on his part, and he saw the world of hip-hop around him as fake. And as his NWA colleague Ice Cube once said, they were rapping about all that they saw around in Los Angeles. So that's kind of where this initial Gangstage thing came from. So then after that, there was another transition back to kind of party raps with people like Will Smith, who was probably the biggest crossover star hip-hop has had to date. And that's kind of introduced to my main theory that I developed in research, that in rap music and in hip-hop, this is kind of happening repeatedly. It goes from clean music to kind of raw gangster music to clean music to raw gangster music over and over again. So it was a brief return to that, but then that didn't last very long, maybe a couple years, and after that, gangsta rap was on top again in a huge way, because you had someone like RZA, who is the head of the Wu-Tang Clan, who was probably up there with the most successful gangsta rap group to date. It's 9 members. He rapped about similar things that Dr. Dre, his compatriots rapped about similar things that Dr. Dre. In his book, The Tao of Wu, I have an excerpt from here. He's rapping about, what he saw in the world around him. And at one point, Wu-Tang Clan had the top-selling album, the top-selling video game, the top-selling comic book, all in the same week, which in my research I have found any act of any genre of anything that matched that, so it kind of proves the market influence they had on there, which that helps me segue into my next point, which is that, so that carried through like, the early to mid 90s, and then the late 90s gangster rap was still really popular. I have research here by Heard, psychological research I've conducted, that compares crime rates with gangster rap lyrics, and they prove that, you can see here, in the early 90s when Dr. Dre was popular, and then, or in the late 80s Dr. Dre was popular, and then the early 90s when RZA was doing his thing, and gangster rap was on top in terms of mainstream rap. Crime rates were up, and they continued to be up through that period, and there's kind of a direct correlation they found. As the crime rates went up, the gangster rap, the violent lyrics increased. And then, but then you can see in the late 90s, the crime rates drastically go down, but gangster rap still goes up on top. Like, for example, the rap artist DMX, who I'm a big fan of, even though those lyrics aren't great, he had 5 #1 albums, which is insane for anyone to have. This is in the late 90s, crime was going down, and you kind of see in some of the lyrics I have here by him, it stopped being more about social issues that were going on around them, and how violence was a big part of that, and more just about, boast-related violence, and I'm going to kill you before you kill me, because that's the best way to kill people. And this to me supports another communications theory, which is groupthink, and basically, gangster rap became a big market entity. It just kept feeding itself, getting bigger and bigger to the point where it lost the original connection it had to social issues and became just a market entity. So then after that, the cycle began again, and gangster rap kind of fell down off the charts because you had people like Outkast, who are probably the closest thing that hip-hop has had to the Beatles. They're the most commercially and critically successful group to ever probably go into hip-hop. They've had various #1 singles. They were the first hip-hop group to win the Grammy for Best Album. Their lyrics kind of brought things back to an emphasis on partying or just romance or having fun, less about violence, really no violence at all. And this is best personified in their biggest hit, Hey Ya, which you'll hear at every wedding until you die, in which Andre 3000 says, "Y'all don't want to hear me, just want to dance," kind of saying this transition has happened and now we're on to something else. You also have people like Kanye West, The Roots, who kind of just switched everything back from gangster rap to non-gangster rap, kind of like beginning things anew by like changing their image. And then that's when we got someone like Jay-Z, who was kind of a part of that late generation gangster rap, like DMX, who didn't really have any social issues behind his music, changing himself, much like Dr. Dre did earlier, and becoming a non-gangster rapper by employing someone like Kanye West as his producer. And you can see this direct transition between lyrics from his albums, Reasonable Doubt, which we have up here, and then Blueprint, just a couple years later in the early 2000s, which we're kind of in this cycle now, are completely non-gangster related. So ultimately, if this cycle is going, where does the future leave us? And I kind of think that this is starting over again, because currently the hip-hop world is going crazy over someone like Future, who are these teenagers that are probably the most violent rap lyrics I've ever heard. They claim to be influenced by Dr. Dre. They're getting crazy musical praise. So really, I think this kind of proves that the cycle's beginning new, because as the head of that group, a very Dr. Dre or RZA-like teenager named Tyler, the Creator, says, he's making his music because he's tired of hearing 40-year-old rappers talking about Gucci.